Nintendo. This is a company that prides itself on innovation, creativity, fun, and an unforgettable lasting legacy. However, this isn't to say Nintendo hasn't had its dark days. The company has had its fair share of problems, to say the least. But in this video, we'll be focusing on one of Nintendo's toughest foes it's ever had to face: piracy. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nintendo isn't dead, and piracy never seemed to be a huge problem for Nintendo consoles. The truth is, piracy's hit Nintendo pretty hard, but the company has fought so hard to prevent piracy that it's backfired right in its face in ways that it could have damaged the legendary video game company forever.
What's it like to play the Nintendo Entertainment System?
Nintendo's battle against piracy can be first traced to the 1980s, when Nintendo introduced the checking integrated circuit, or simply the lockout chip, to the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now if there's one thing we all know Nintendo loves, it's power. I mean, they even had a magazine named after that. This chip gave Nintendo power over unlicensed publishers, enforced region locking, and of course, prevented pirated cartridges from being used in their consoles. This is somewhat of a topic for a later time, but companies that didn't want to comply with Nintendo's strict policies were forced to bypass the chip in order to sell their own games, which companies like Tengen successfully sought out to do. Long story short, pirated games, including several multi-carts boasting several games in a single cartridge, were still able to reach home consoles in both the NES and later the SNES generations. However, Nintendo's home console successes far outweighed piracy setbacks. So let's look at the 1990s. Nintendo was on top of the gaming world, and if you hadn't known yet, Nintendo even passed up on a deal to work with Sony to produce the original PlayStation. Yeah, there was a Nintendo PlayStation, but that's a topic for a later video. The point is, Nintendo allowed Sony to venture off and create its own CD-ROM based video game console. After all, that's where times were going. CDs were the future of physical media, whether Nintendo liked it or not. Yet, Nintendo chose to stick with cartridges, using them as the main format for the Nintendo 64. Now, don't get me wrong, the Nintendo 64 remains one of the greatest consoles of all time, regardless of its use of cartridges. After all, cartridges loaded faster, were more durable, and most importantly, were harder to be pirated. Yet, Nintendo's stubbornness, as well as its overcautiousness of piracy, led to its fall from grace from here on. N64 cartridges were limited to a maximum of 64 megabytes of storage, while a typical CDR could reach sizes of around 600 to 700 megabytes. Let's take a game like Final Fantasy VII, an iconic PlayStation 1 title originally meant for the Nintendo 64. Final Fantasy VII is about 1,360 megabytes, which was split into 3 CDs on the PS1. Uncompressed, this game would have required approximately 22 cartridges on the N64. Yeah. Sure, PlayStation 1 games were easier to copy and pirate, but N64 cartridges were simply too small and more expensive to produce. Developers found more flexibility and therefore more potential in the PlayStation 1 and its disc-based games. Even when Nintendo released the 64 Double D, what a name, right? They still opted to use smaller capacity magnetic discs. This peripheral flopped, never making its way out of Japan, and Sony established itself as the new king of home consoles. History would soon seem to repeat itself in the next generation, as Nintendo opted to use mini DVDs for the GameCube while the PlayStation 2 and Xbox used regular DVDs. Now, Nintendo's anti-piracy countermeasures in this generation are somewhat more justifiable. I mean, look at Sega Dreamcast, for example. It fell victim to rampant piracy very early in its life. However, many DVDs were limited to only 1.5 gigabytes of storage, compared to the maximum size of 8.5 gigabytes of a dual-layer DVD. Once again, Nintendo saw its home console fall to Sony, as the PlayStation 2 completely dominated the market with more content, better graphics, and the ability to play CDs and DVDs, among some of their other features. By 2006, Nintendo had gone over a decade under the shadow of Sony and its PlayStation consoles. Thanks to a load of factors including Nintendo's brilliant marketing strategy for the Wii, as well as Sony's early failures with the PlayStation 3,
$599 US,
Nintendo finally had a firm grip on the market with its brand new console, which at last utilized full DVD-based games, but suffered a fair share of piracy troubles nevertheless. A majority of Nintendo's struggles would soon stem from other issues, such as the underpowering of the Wii and Wii U, as well as the fading interest in the gimmicks that made the Nintendo Wii so profitable. Nintendo would later find itself targeting YouTube channels, placing copyright claims and ads on YouTube channels that played specific Nintendo games. Of course. The Nintendo Switch, unlike other current-gen consoles, uses game cards, but thanks to new technology is able to hold up to 32 gigabytes of storage on one card, allowing for loads of content to be added to a game with much less sacrifices than other consoles, while making piracy much more difficult, at least for a physical medium. Nintendo came, Nintendo fought, but Nintendo couldn't really do much to conquer piracy without hurting itself in the process. In the end, Nintendo remains one of the top video game companies to have ever existed in the world, with its current console, the Nintendo Switch, racking up sales at a lightning-fast pace despite the company's struggles over the last couple decades. It's great, however, to see Nintendo finally succeeding with the Nintendo Switch, and how it hasn't really been easy to pirate as of yet. We'll see in the future what pirates and modders can do about this, but for now, this has been a Lost Saint video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, rate, and share for more.